The sun had barely risen, casting a soft golden glow over the quiet streets, when the sound of an engine sputtering to a halt echoed in front of a small roadside diner. The Rolls-Royce, sleek and spotless, seemed out of place against the cracked pavement and worn-out signage. Inside the diner, Emily wiped down the counter with the same quiet focus she brought to everything she did. She didn't expect anything different from this morning. Just another long day filled with coffee refills and kind smiles for tired travelers. That is, until the man stepped in. He was tall, dressed in a tailored suit that practically whispered wealth. His frustration was clear as he pulled off his sunglasses and asked if anyone nearby knew something about cars. Emily looked up, unsure at first. But when no one else offered help, she hesitated only for a second before setting down her rag and walking out with him. "I can take a look," she said, her voice calm but confident. The billionaire, whose name no one in the diner had recognized just yet, was skeptical but desperate. Emily knelt beside the car, hands steady, eyes scanning the engine with the familiarity of someone who'd done this before. And that's when things started to shift. The man, intrigued by her skill and poise, leaned closer, watching her work. She explained the issue in simple terms, not showing off, just helping. Her apron still clung to her waist, a reminder that she was supposed to be serving pancakes, not fixing luxury vehicles. As the minutes passed, something else caught his eye. It wasn't the way she handled tools like she'd been doing it all her life. It wasn't even her calm under pressure. It was the watch, gleaming faintly beneath her rolled-up sleeve. It wasn't flashy, but he knew enough about luxury timepieces to recognize it. That particular model wasn't something you'd find on a waitress's wrist. It was rare, expensive, and deeply personal. He asked her about it casually, but she brushed it off with a quick, almost practiced smile. "Just something I picked up a long time ago," she said, standing up and wiping her hands. But his curiosity was sparked. Who was this girl, really? Because people don't just end up with watches like that. Not unless they've lived a life very different from the one they're pretending to live now. As he stepped back into his now working Rolls-Royce, he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd stumbled onto a story far bigger than a broken-down car on a quiet morning. And he wasn't going to leave until he found out the truth. The engine purred again, smooth and quiet, like nothing had ever gone wrong. The billionaire nodded his thanks, though his mind was far from the road. Emily, the waitress with grease on her hands and $1 million watch on her wrist, had left him with more questions than answers. He pulled out slowly, but instead of heading back to his meeting across town, he parked just down the street, out of sight. He needed to know more. Inside the diner, Emily returned to her routine like nothing had happened. She poured coffee, took orders, smiled politely. No one seemed to think twice about what had just happened, and that told him something. She'd been hiding in plain sight for a while. She fit in too well, almost too perfectly. And that watch, it wasn't just valuable. It was a rare collector's edition, one that hadn't been made for public sale. He'd seen one before, on the wrist of someone powerful, someone connected. He glanced through the diner's window. Emily laughed softly with a regular customer, handing him an extra napkin like she always did. The way she moved, the way she read people, kept everything calm and in order. It was more than just good service. It was controlled, measured, like someone trained to handle pressure. And that only deepened the mystery. Back inside, Emily caught a glimpse of the Rolls still parked nearby. Her heart ticked up. She didn't like being noticed. She had worked hard to disappear, to blend into this quiet life. The watch, she never should have worn it today. But it had been a gift, a reminder. And sometimes on hard days, she needed it close. She knew who he was, of course. Nathan Langford, tech billionaire, CEO. He had that kind of face you didn't forget once you saw it in the business magazines. And if he recognized the watch, it meant trouble. Because only a few people in the world would know what it really meant, or who it really belonged to. Emily cleared another table, but her mind wasn't on work anymore. She glanced at the clock, then out the window again. Still there, watching, not driving off. She could feel the tension creeping back into her shoulders. Nathan finally stepped out of his car, not to confront her, but to come back in under the guise of grabbing a coffee to go. He sat at the counter, right where she had to face him. His eyes were friendly, but sharp, calculating. So he said, stirring cream into his cup. "You said you picked up that watch a long time ago. You mind if I ask, where exactly?" Emily looked at him, carefully. Her smile didn't reach her eyes this time. "I don't think the story would make much sense to you," she replied softly. Nathan leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "Try me." And just like that, she knew her past had found her again. Emily didn't answer right away. She focused on the coffee pot, topping off an old man's mug, like she hadn't just been asked a question that could crack her world wide open. Nathan waited, sipping slowly, watching her every move. The diner buzzed softly around them. Silverware clinking, murmured conversations, the sizzle from the griddle. But between them, there was silence. Thick, stretched tight. She finally looked up, her tone light. "Why would a man like you be so interested in a waitress's watch?" Nathan smiled politely, but there was an edge to it. "Because that watch doesn't belong in a place like this. And neither do you." The words hit harder than she let on. She turned away, busying herself with plates that didn't need rearranging. She'd spent 3 years staying under the radar. No paper trail, no photos, no real name. Just small towns and short shifts, moving when things got too close. And now, in this quiet little corner of nowhere, someone was finally asking the wrong questions. Nathan didn't mean to scare her, but curiosity, especially his kind, had always bordered on obsession. And this wasn't just about a fancy watch. It was about the feeling he got when he looked at her, like she had lived a life full of secrets. High-end connections. Danger, even. Elsewhere, across town, a black SUV parked quietly outside an old motel. Inside, a man sat at a desk covered with surveillance photos. Most recent, grainy images of a young woman in a diner uniform. A red circle drawn around her wrist in one. He picked up his phone. "She's been spotted," he said into the receiver. Same watch, same profile. Back at the diner, Emily sensed it. That old familiar pull in her gut. The feeling that something was shifting around her. She'd spent too long looking over her shoulder to miss the signs. The questions were just the beginning. The real storm was coming. Nathan, still at the counter, noticed her glance toward the door. Quick, subtle, he leaned forward. "Listen," he said, more serious now. "I don't know what you're running from, but I've seen enough to know you're not just some waitress." Emily's eyes narrowed slightly. "Maybe I am. Maybe I just got tired of the life I had before." Nathan shook his head. "People like you don't disappear by accident. And that watch, it's not just rare. It belonged to someone connected to the Donovan Foundation. Private security, classified contracts. That's not something you find in a pawn shop." She didn't respond, but she didn't deny it either. Outside, the SUV's door creaked open. A man in a dark coat stepped out, adjusting an earpiece as he looked toward the diner. Emily's time was running out, and both she and Nathan could feel it. The bell above the diner door jingled softly as the man in the dark coat stepped inside. His eyes scanned the room quickly, too quickly for a casual customer. He moved with the kind of calm you only see in people trained not to panic. Emily saw him the moment he entered. Her hand tightened slightly around the coffee pot, but she kept pouring like nothing had changed. Only her eyes flicked toward Nathan, sharp and warning. Nathan noticed too. The air had shifted. This wasn't just someone grabbing breakfast. He leaned back slightly in his stool, trying not to draw attention, but ready. He didn't know exactly what was going on yet, but the look on Emily's face said everything. This wasn't a coincidence. The man sat 2 stools down, ordered black coffee, and didn't touch it when it came. He kept glancing at Emily, like he was waiting for a signal, or an opening. Nathan leaned in again, his voice low. "We need to talk. Somewhere else." Emily didn't nod, didn't speak, but after a beat, she walked into the back kitchen, knowing he'd follow. He slipped in quietly behind her, careful not to be seen. Inside, the heat from the stoves and fryers pressed against them, but it wasn't what made her sweat. She pulled off her apron and grabbed a small duffel bag from under a crate of onions. It was already packed. "You were ready to run," Nathan said, surprised. "I'm always ready," she whispered. Outside, the man at the counter glanced at the kitchen door. Then he stood. Emily's voice dropped even lower. "They found me. I don't know how, but they did." Nathan tried to keep up. "Who are asterisk they asterisk? Who are you really?" She didn't answer, not yet. Instead, she opened the back exit a crack and peeked into the alley behind the diner. Empty, for now. "I used to work for someone powerful. Not just tech money, but government contracts. Black ops, cleanup work. I saw too much. They said I knew too much. I left before they could make me disappear for good." Nathan stared at her, and the watch. "It was a gift," she said softly, "from the only person who tried to protect me." Nathan stepped closer, "Then let me help." But it was too late. The back door suddenly slammed shut. From the alley, a second man appeared, blocking the only exit. The one inside had drawn something from under his coat. Not a gun, but something just as dangerous, a tranquilizer. Quiet. Clean. Emily backed up, eyes darting for a plan. Nathan looked between them, his mind racing. And then, without thinking, he reached for the fire extinguisher on the wall. Because they were out of time. The extinguisher hissed to life with a sharp burst, a cloud of white smoke filling the narrow kitchen in seconds. Emily ducked low, pulling Nathan with her as the fog swallowed them both. Shouts erupted behind them, confused, muffled. The man by the back door stumbled, caught off guard. In that chaos, Emily moved fast, shoving open the service hatch near the floor, barely big enough for one person at a time. "Go," she yelled over the noise. Nathan hesitated for a breath, then slid through. Emily followed, dragging the duffel behind her just as a dart zipped past, hitting the wall with a quiet asterisk thunk asterisk. They tumbled into the alley and didn't stop, running toward the side of the diner where Nathan's Rolls-Royce was still parked. He fumbled for his keys, hands shaking, but Emily grabbed them. "I'll drive," she snapped. The engine roared to life, and they peeled off just as one of the men emerged from the diner, shouting into a comms device. Tires screeched behind them, another vehicle giving chase almost immediately. A black SUV, just like the one from the motel. Inside the Rolls, Nathan glanced at Emily. "Where are we going?" She didn't answer right away. Her eyes were locked on the road ahead, jaw tight. Someplace they won't follow. But first, we need to make a stop. Behind them, the SUV was closing in. Then just when Nathan thought things couldn't spiral any further, his phone vibrated. He pulled it out, expecting a message from his office, maybe a missed call. Instead, he saw an alert, a withdrawal request, from an offshore account, one only two people in the world had access to. His and his late brother's. His breath caught. Emily noticed. "What is it?" He showed her the screen. Her face went pale. "That's not possible," she said. "Your brother, he died in that plane crash 2 years ago." Nathan's voice dropped. "That's what I thought." The chase suddenly wasn't the only thing pressing down on them. Something deeper, bigger, was unfolding beneath the surface. If the account was being accessed, and if someone knew Emily's location at the exact moment she let her guard down, then the odds were higher than ever that this wasn't just about her past. It was about a betrayal much closer to home. The SUV rammed their back bumper, jolting them forward. Emily gripped the wheel tighter. "Whoever's behind this, they don't just want to silence me anymore." Nathan stared out the window, mind racing. "They want us both gone." And as the highway stretched out in front of them, the truth started to unravel. Nothing, her past, his brother's death, or even the sudden car breakdown, had been an accident. The Rolls-Royce swerved off the highway, tires screeching as Emily took a sharp exit toward an abandoned shipping yard she remembered from months ago, a place forgotten by most, where cell signals faded and shadows stretched long. The SUV followed, headlights bouncing wildly over the cracked pavement. Emily killed the lights and cut the engine, coasting silently behind a rusted stack of freight containers. They sat in darkness, breathing hard, listening. Nathan's hand hovered near the door handle. "What's the plan?" Emily reached into the duffel and pulled out a small black device, a signal jammer. "We end it here. They can't call for backup. This is where we stop running." Before Nathan could ask more, she was out of the car, moving like she'd done this before, because she had. The SUV slowed near the yard's edge, its headlights sweeping left and right. Emily crouched behind a crate, eyes narrowed. Two men stepped out. She recognized one from the diner. The other she hadn't seen in years. "Wes," she whispered. Nathan joined her, crouched low. "Who is he?" "My old handler," she said. "I thought he was dead." "He was supposed to be dead." They listened as the men argued. Snippets floated through the still air. Account transfer, loose ends, Langford. That's when Nathan finally understood. This wasn't just about Emily. It was about him too. His brother's offshore account, the sudden hack, the mysterious death. It was all connected. Someone had faked his brother's death and used Emily as bait to lure Nathan in, because he held the access codes that would unlock billions in dormant assets. Emily stood quietly and crept closer. She had no weapons, just the edge of surprise, and the instincts that had kept her alive this long. Then, without warning, a voice cut through the dark. "Emily." She froze. Wes stepped out into the open, hands raised slightly. "You can't run forever," he said. "You know how this ends." Nathan emerged behind her, leveling the fire extinguisher again, but Wes didn't flinch. Then it happened fast. The other man lunged from the shadows, gun raised, but Nathan was quicker this time. He knocked him off balance just as Emily tackled Wes to the ground. A shot fired, wide. A scream followed. When it was over, Emily was standing, breathless, gun in hand. The police arrived minutes later, tipped off by Nathan, who'd sent a GPS ping before they killed the signal. The two men were arrested. Emily, cleared of all past charges, was finally free. Or so she thought. As the dust settled and the sun began to rise, Nathan checked his phone again. Another alert. Another withdrawal request. But this time, it came from inside his own company. And the name listed on the request. His brother, still very much alive. Nathan stared at the screen in silence, the name blinking back at him like a ghost. His brother, Adrian Langford. Officially declared dead after a private jet crash 2 years ago. No survivors, no trace. But somehow, here he was, trying to move money through accounts only the two of them had ever accessed. The signature, the encryption, it was real. And if Adrian was alive, it meant everything Nathan believed about his death, his company, and even his own role in it was wrong. Emily sat beside him on the hood of the Rolls, watching the sunrise push through the gray skyline. The chaos was over for now. The police had taken statements, the attackers were in custody, and the truth about Emily's past was no longer a secret hanging over her head. She was tired, but lighter, freer. She'd survived worse, but this felt different. This felt like a door finally closing. "You think it's really him?" she asked softly, eyes on the horizon. Nathan nodded. "The signature's too precise, and he used a phrase we created as kids to encrypt the login. No one else would know it." Emily exhaled slowly, her voice quiet. Then he let the world believe he was dead. Maybe to disappear. Or maybe to build something in the shadows. Nathan turned to her. He was always 5 steps ahead of everyone. If he faked his death, it wasn't just to vanish. It was for control. Maybe of the company. Maybe of something bigger. She looked at him carefully. And now? He slid the phone back into his pocket. Now I find him. And I ask him why. They drove back to town in silence, the early morning light spilling across the windshield. The diner was closed when they passed it, caution tape fluttering gently across the door. A place that had once been Emily's hiding spot now marked the beginning of something else. She turned to Nathan. "I don't know what happens next, but I'm done hiding." He gave her a small smile. "Good, because I could use someone who knows how to fix things, even Rolls-Royces." They both laughed, the kind of laugh that comes after a long storm. Not because it's over, but because you survived it. And as they drove toward whatever came next, neither of them looked back. Sometimes it's the quietest people who carry the loudest truths. And sometimes a billionaire doesn't find the answers in boardrooms or spreadsheets, but in a small-town diner where a waitress wears a $1 million watch and a lifetime of secrets on her wrist.